Everyone, I'm Steve Savant. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Phoenix, Arizona on KXXT Family Values Radio, and I also want to welcome our online audience on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I also want to give a big shout out to Beyond Fear to Freedom, one of the best Christ-centered fellowships that provide a safe and loving community for women in recovery. Just check out their website, beyondfeartofreedom.org. And don't forget, if you want to write me, feel free to do so at steve@180uturn.com. That's steve at 180yoouturn.com. Happy to try to, as best I can, to get to your questions and statements and happy times that you guys send me. It's a very encouraging email, I just have to say. Thank you so much. Well, today we're in day 2, sitting here with Kevin Buchanan, and so many people, when they hear this whole story, and I recommend that once this is played and aired on KXXT, that you go out to our website, watch them in chronology. You'll get the full picture, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It builds upon, one show builds upon another. And so if you're coming in Tuesday, hey, I need to check out Monday. Yes, you do. So we're talking about it, and we got to Kevin's part where, he's dangerous now. His dad left, and now he's having problems because he's learning about weed, dope, sex. And now I'm 18, and I have a brand new problem that confronts you.
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
It's a blessing, but it's a problem. One of the women that I was with, she was pregnant, and we weren't very serious. We were, I would say I was exclusive. I can't testify to what was going on with her at that point, but she wanted to have an abortion, and I didn't believe in that, and I still don't. And I was like, well, what's the solution here? Because I don't want to abort my baby. I know it's your choice, but she's like, well, the only way I can do this, my dad will kill me if I'm not married when I have a baby. Well, we got to get married then, because I want my kid to be here. And so, yeah, I've got a kid on the way.
Can you imagine, this is not even a debate 50 years ago and for all of Western history, right? Yeah. I mean, you're sitting there, yeah, well, you're just going to have to get married.
Got to get married.
You did the deed, and I'm sorry you did it, but now here's the consequence, right?
Absolutely.
Today I have the option to go ahead and tank the entire situation by taking the life of a child. I'm sorry, but I just don't live there. Okay, now, we're not talking about that today, though, but we are talking about is you get married. Is anybody at 18, I'm just asking, my father got married at 18, he had to get married, the savant was the reason, right? I became the reason. But is any 18-year-old ready for marriage?
Dude, I wasn't even ready for college, much less marriage. So, no, I was not ready. I wasn't a horrible husband, and I wasn't a horrible father. I just didn't know how to be either one. So it's kind of like building an airplane in the air. I just didn't know what I was doing, and God did what he did, and he preserved everything. My daughter was born, but I was all over the map, like school, work, family. I just didn't know. I didn't know how to be what my dad was, and that was where I was falling short. Yeah,
because he came from a different generation, a different thought process.
Absolutely.
And he, at the time, was in the Lord in a big way.
Yeah.
Okay, now when I think about this, most people, at 18, marriage doesn't come with a manual, and neither does having a child.
No, not at all. I mean, I was happy. When I say I was happy, she was a good woman, and she was a good mom, but above everything, she was understanding and patient with me, and so I didn't even know how to change diapers, so I didn't know how to change the diapers. I didn't know, the milk on the wrist, and so she breastfed, and then when she went back to work, it was, we co-cared for our daughter, and so everything was just all over the map. I was learning as I went. It was OJT, on-the-job training.
Well, I just got to tell you, I, being the oldest of 9 children, I've done a few diapers in my time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so by the time I got married, I was expertise.
Okay.
I had serious expertise.
Where were you back then?
Yeah, I don't, what was I? Well, at least I just had found the Lord, so at least thank God for that. I mean, I can't imagine entering marriage and having children back in the day in the late 60s, early 70s, right? I can't even perceive that.
Yeah.
Okay, now, baby's born in 92?
Yes.
Healthy?
Healthy.
Ready to go?
Yeah, healthy and a big baby and happy. She was good. She was good to go, and we had everything for her. Like I remember when we went shopping, one of the 50 times we went shopping for her, like we got everything. Like we read books, and the baby needs this. You got to have these types of bottles. You got to have. I mean, we had like $1 million worth of Similac and baby food, and she did the breast pump, and just all. We had everything. We had a storehouse for this baby, and so I even remember, Steve, where remember the old school VHS camcorders?
Oh yeah.
I had one on a tripod in her room over her crib, and wire coming under the carpet into our bedroom, plugged into our TV, because that's what we did back then. There was no Bluetooth, and we could watch the baby on channel 2 and hear her when she was in her bedroom.
I love the old tech of the old days. You know what I mean? Now today, you know, my kids, my daughters and sons, they have all this tech stuff, wireless everything. You know, I mean, it's awesome. Okay, so are you starting to kind of grow into fatherhood? Though you kind of like being a daddy, you know, coming home and
Absolutely, it was terrifying and exhilarating in one package. So
isn't that the truth?
Yeah, I was scared to death. She was, you know, I played football. She was smaller than the footballs that I held, and you know, and fragile, and but she was my baby. I remember she had the same birthmark on her right toe that I had, and so I was just like, hey, this is my mini-me, you know, and so like this is my kid, and I just want to love her and I want to teach her, you know, proper relationships between men and women. And even though I didn't practice that with her mom initially, but I wanted to be there for her. I wanted to be present.
And just as far as a thumbs up from Steve, I mean, I don't want to get into moral relativity here, but you did what most people don't do, and that's give this kid a name. You got married. See, I salute. I'm sorry, but I salute that. I'm old guard, old thinking. That's how it was back in the day, and I'm very, very good about that. So things are going pretty well, and then what happened?
Well, let me add this before I say what happened. She still remains, and I've had a lot of accomplishments, you know, while I was on the inside and since I've been home by the grace of God. But she's still, my daughter is still the best accomplishment in my life. She's the best thing I've ever done. So I know I went half on a baby. Her mom played 50%, but she's the best thing I've ever done in this life. So my daughter's not quite 2 months old yet. She was born in January, actually January 30th, and March of that same year. She wasn't keeping her food down. She was a bit lethargic, and so we take her to the emergency room, you know, and back then you had to get permission from your the medical doctor or the baby's doctor. The insurance had to approve you to go to an emergency room, and so the doctor approved us to go. So we get there, and of course they take her in, we're doing the paperwork, and a couple hours later they come back out and there's officers and they arrest me, and they were like, "Are you Kevin Buchanan?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, what's going on?" And there was no threat. I didn't feel threatened because my dad worked for the Department of Public Safety, so I always had respect, great respect to even to this day for law enforcement. And I was like, "Yes, I am. Yes, sir." And they said, "You're under arrest." And I was like, "Well, for what? What did I do?" And they said, "You're under arrest for child abuse." And I was like, "What? Like what? Whose kid? What? It didn't even occur to me they were talking about my daughter." And they said, "Yeah." And the doctor came out, and while they're arresting me, the doctor's telling me that she had a skull fracture. And I'm like, "What?" And she had bruises on her body. I'm like, "Well, my daughter's extremely light-skinned. I mean, because she's, you know, her mom's white, I'm black. I don't remember seeing any bruises on my daughter's body, but if you say there are, but I had no idea this girl had a head fracture." And so they arrested me, and they charged me, and they indicted me for child abuse.
Now, I just want to go down this road for a second with your permission, Kevin.
Absolutely.
You know, when you're arrested for something, first of all, you don't even, it's not even true. You're struggling with the whole guilt by some association. I don't even know how they made the assumption.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, yes, okay, let's just say there was a skull fracture. Let's just say there was bruises, okay? But that's not an autopilot guilt trip to put on somebody that they did it.
Yeah, I look back on it, and I've researched a lot of child abuse cases. Typically, the people that abuse their children do not take their babies to the hospital. That's not something that they do. They're forced to do it because someone. So that was the first thing I was shocked by, and then they questioned me for 20 hours, and they were just like, "Is it? You know, you're a big guy." And I remember one of the officers, he made the sly comment like, you're big as a gorilla, you know, you've got gorilla strength. Do you think it's possible that you could have done it? And I was like, no. And he's like, are you telling me that? I mean, it's just over and asking me the same 4 questions over and over again. And at the end of all of that, I come out charged with child abuse. So I don't know how they reached that conclusion that it was me, because during my trial, nobody came in and said that I did anything. But the jury, it's an inflammatory charge. When there's children involved, somebody did it, and somebody's got to pay, and that was Kevin. Now,
what could it have been? Some sort of an accident, not having anything to do with you? Just, hey, maybe she fell off the couch, or maybe somebody was, you know, I mean, things happen.
That was what they asked me about, and there was one particular instance where while I was feeding her, well, her mom was right there feeding her, she kind of slipped a little bit, but she didn't fall and hard enough or on the ground or anything like that to fracture her skull. She slipped in my arm, and I told them that, and they jumped on it. They were like, "Oh, well, you dropped her." And then in trial, they were like, "Oh my goodness, the the doctor came in and said the force that was necessary to do this, Steve, it'd be the equivalent of, you know, I think they said falling off a first-story or second-story building. When the jury heard that, like, you know, they're looking at me like he did something to her. And so, yeah, it's sensitive for me, but I recognize today that if I don't talk about it, the enemy still has power.
Right. And the bigger issue here is also I don't like the aspect of interrogation, and what I mean by that is the turning on and off of the audio tape, turning it on when they're asking what I would call the very poignant questions, and turning it off when they're trying to set you up.
That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. And so, but you know, I look back on it and I say all of this happened because I was making these decisions over here. This was the cause, all of this was the effect.
You know, my dad used to say, you're free to do whatever you want, but you're not free from the consequences of your actions. I'm all over that, and I want to be able to come to a place where we defend the rights for people to have a fair trial and to really go the whole mile against and go to the wall. And remember, I'm a conservative.
Absolutely.
Go to the wall for the truth. When we come back, we're going to continue the story of Kevin Buchanan. It's awesome stuff that you're going to say, wow, I cannot believe. I don't know if I could live with but being put in prison for something I didn't do.
It's I think the reason why it was so hard for me to even write that out was because I've been so silent for so long. The Justice Project has come to me. They want to help me. The different lawyers have approached me. And I've always felt like, don't do it because it'll be hitting a hornet's nest. Like everything's over with, that's 30 years ago. But then when I prayed and I prayed and I sought advice from counsels, different counsels in my life, everybody was like, you gotta tell your story, and this is a big part of your story. Like this, without this, the rest of it means nothing. At least the after. So I appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Overhaul your thinking, your identity, and your future. They'll keep you encouraged with some great insight and biblical truth. Just friend them on Facebook or go out to their website at beyondfeartofreedom.org. BFF, where you might just discover best friend forever.
Well, welcome back. I'm Steve Savant. You're listening to 180, and with our special guest, Kevin Buchanan. I love this guy, man, and I just want to be able to talk about his story with the freedom. I said just before we went to the break, I'm not a man of political disposition, but I am, if you saw my career for 38 years, I had my own show of finance for advisors as well as the public, wrote tons of articles, probably got, I don't know, who knows, 5,000 videos out there, and I've done a lot. And people know me as a conservative, fiscal conservative guy. I might be a little liberal on the socialist, but I don't care about that. Fiscal conservative. And that conservatism, because I'm an evangelical Christian, actually goes even deeper.
Yes.
So when I say to you, I've been in prison 16 years. I've done hundreds and hundreds of tank orders with inmates, male and female, fed, state, and jail. And I've been in there doing chapel services. And I met a ton of people. Most of them, yes, they did the deed. They're guilty. They're in prison for a reason.
Yeah.
But Kevin's one of the few guys I've ever met where I was like, it doesn't fit the profile, doesn't fit the guy's attitude, doesn't fit the facts, the stats. Sounds like this thing was hacked. That's what it sounds like. So I want to talk about this because when you go through, like we had a couple of weeks back, we had a couple of gals that were totally into dope. And to me, to lay a woman out that's trying to recover from drugs naked on the bottom of the basement floor of a jail is so humiliating. I mean, people should be up in arms for stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, usually I'm all over it. Most of the detention officers I know are great guys. The staff that are involved, almost always awesome. They're trying to do their best job. But I just don't understand protocols like that. Now, when we're talking about protocols in interrogation, they keep giving you one plea after another plea, trying to see if you'll just bite on it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, everything, you know, they went from, 15-year plea down to probation. And, a lot of my family thought I was like the biggest fool ever. But I couldn't have been a fool because the Bible says a fool is somebody that says in their heart there's no God. They thought I should have taken the plea to avoid a long time in prison. But I knew in my heart, Steve, that the one person I would have to look in the eye and explain to what happened and what I did as a result was my daughter, who was an infant at the time, and there was no way I was going to sign anything and admit to doing anything to her to save myself. I just couldn't do it. So I said no to all of that, and I went to trial, and a jury of my peers, excuse me, disagreed with me. So.
Okay, the first, if I remember your story here correctly, the first original sentence was 41 years down. 41 years. What was it?
Well, the judge, he mis-sentenced me. He gave me more time than even the law allowed. So I was able to go back, and I gave back 15 years. I'm sorry, 16 years on my sentence. So they resentenced me, and that left me with a quarter century. So, you know, that was what I had to do, which I did day for day. They made me do all of it.
Okay, so 25 or 20?
25.
25 years down. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you were a young man.
Yeah, I was super young.
Yeah, and you're not really criminal material.
No, I mean,
I
you
mean-
know, I fractured some laws, don't get me wrong. And I have to point this out, Steve, not just for your listeners, but for the sake of the truth. Even though I didn't do what they convicted me of, and I did time for something I didn't do, that doesn't mean I was innocent. Man, I was doing things out there in the streets, man, that I knew I shouldn't do. You know, driving around in stolen cars, hanging out with people that were doing things that were not only illegal but immoral. Because not everything legal is moral, right? And
True.
and vice versa. And so I understand that because of those choices, I exposed myself to a lot. And so that was the net that I fell into because I didn't stay in the sheepfold of Christ.
And I can just say that these things like this, they seem so small at the time.
Yeah.
And they snowball. It's a snowball effect. It starts out at the top of the mountain with a child being born. It sounds great. It's all euphoric. And by the time I get down into the valley, this little snowball is a huge boulder, and it's just crushing me.
Yeah.
And to lose 25 years of your life is bad enough, and for something you didn't do, it's even more tragic. Now, I have never been, my dad did time, some of my brothers have done time. I come from an incarcerated family. I get it, right?
Yeah.
I haven't, but I have people that have. And I have nothing but compassion for people who have made mistakes, and every one of them did things that were wrong, and they deserved it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when I'm talking about your situation here, I'm trying to think about what's it like to have everything stripped from me. It's not just the innocent factor, but now when you lose freedom, you lose your flexibility, you lose your job, everything goes down the toilet.
Yeah. Yeah, once again, I lost my identity again. Because what happened was, even though my mom and dad were broken up, I still was part of a family unit. And so it just was a fractured family unit, mother and father. But our family values were practiced. And so I go into prison, I felt like a foreigner in a foreign land. You know, there were dudes in there that were in and out, in and out. That was their lifestyle. You know, when you're gang banging, when you're doing those types of things, you expect that, right? And so, just like when you live in Arizona, you expect it to be hot in the summer months. So this was something that they say they charged it to the game. This wasn't a game that I could charge it to because it wasn't a game I was playing. So when I got into prison, I didn't really speak the language of everybody else. I didn't really have the life experience of everybody else. And that, for me, was the hardest part because I was forced to live with individuals that, though God loved them as much as he loved me, I was a child of God in a foreign land hanging out with dudes that were, you know, as far from God as you could possibly be.
How big is Joseph's story to you? How big is that story?
It's huge. It's huge. A lot of people compare my story to the prodigal, and there's some elements that correlate. But I look at Joseph, man, he didn't do anything to get put in that pit.
That's right.
Right? But the proof that he was innocent of anything was what God did, the minor setback for a major comeback. So where you see God step into Joseph's story, and I see him stepping into my story, is that where the validation from the king comes from is what he's giving me back and how he's restoring me and where he's sending me and elevating me to. So that's the evidence to the world that I have of guilt or innocence. So
and we get into Friday, we're going to talk about everything that the Lord's done for you,
Absolutely.
and it's going to be great.
Absolutely.
Now, when I'm thinking about, you know, you're going in, you're I'm assuming you're doing jail time while your court date is being set up.
Yes,
and all
sir.
This, okay.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, you're in jail. You're not used to that whole scene. That's a whole nother thing. If
Yeah.
you've never been in, and I can't say, ladies and gentlemen, I only visit there as a chaplain's associate. I don't even live there, and it's bad. You know,
it's different as a resident.
It's different, yeah. And I would never say I know what they feel. I don't. I just know what it is to be a son of an inmate and to go through what my sister and I went through. Now, when I think about, you know, heading for once you hear that guilty, how long did it take you to go from jail to where they're going to send you to prison?
2.5, almost 3 years.
So you're in jail 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
They take that off your sentence?
Yeah, they added it into, I had to fight them for it, but yeah, they didn't give it to me. I had to fight for it, but yes, sir.
Okay. And I just want you to say, you don't have to agree with this, but I can only say that and I have nothing, I'm sure that public defenders got more work than they could ever do. Their stacks of cases are just endless. I get that, and I'm not trying to put it down, but most of these people that I deal with could have been in and out of prison. I mean, I have a gal that we had on this show years back. There's no way this gal should have done 10 years. If she would have had any kind of attorney, would you say you had a pretty good defense?
I didn't have a defense because there was really nothing that said that I did anything. And so my lawyer did not put on a defense, and I agree with you. The public defender's office is like overloaded, right? It's like our teachers today, but times 1,000 because people's freedoms are at stake, their lives are at stake. So they have a next to impossible job to do. And so in my case, there was really no defense that was offered. There was really nothing you could defend against when nobody said that you did anything, other than the fact that you're charged with it. So I look back on it today, and I'm actually thankful. Steve, man, this is going to sound so crazy. I am so thankful, and the reason why I'm thankful for this experience is because if I hadn't gone through it, brother, I would be just as blind and ignorant. I'd be just as dead to the state of the world and evangelism and the need to preach the gospel as everybody else. And so this experience brought me to that consciousness.
I'm always sorrowful that people have to go through the meat grinder of incarceration to figure that out. I mean, I always hate it.
I'm hard-headed.
Yeah, and I'm there with you as well. I just really, if you have kids in trouble, if you're listening to this story and you say, my kid isn't really that bad, but it doesn't take really anything to get somebody charged with something that's going to tie them up. I have a gal that we met years ago, very, very sporty gal, drove a great car. She killed somebody in an auto accident. She went 10 years down, and she had $100,000 attorney pick up her job, trying to defend her. This gal, one night, changed her life. See, this is where I get into this. One night set the course on fire for something else, and it is a meat grinder in there. And if you say, Steve, I just don't understand how you guys can go into prison, I got to tell you, God always brings us to people who need Him the most. And I got to tell you, I have even received back to myself the benefit of going in. And the Lord promises in Proverbs, He says that if you water, he who waters himself, he'll be watered. So, all right, when we're talking about that, I'm thinking about, well, you're leaving jail now. You're heading for prison. What's your thought process?
Well, first of all, what they convicted me of is a very heinous crime because it involves a child, and I knew that in prison, prisoners don't tend to look kindly on that, and so I didn't really have fear as much as I had an awareness that when I got there might be a problem, and so my first day there, back then they had inmates processing inmates coming in. And so they knew what I was there for, but the assumption was that it was a sexual component. And so the guy was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps from the yard office at Central Unit, and he says, hey, you Buchanan? I'm like, yeah, what's up? He's like, well, you got to roll up. I'm like, what do you mean I got to roll up? I just got here. He's like, you can't stay here. We say you can't stay here. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, who's we? Like, we is plural. You're the only one standing here. So my first day in prison, I sent a dude out in a helicopter just to let everybody else know I've been tried unjustly once. It's not going down twice.
I just can't imagine, and I've been in sexual offenders units, so I'm hip to all that. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to continue our story of Kevin Buchanan. It's an awesome story. And by the way, if you're not doing anything Friday night, go out to BFF to their meeting at 5:30 at 6:15. Food and childcare provided. They have a meeting for the guys, a meeting for the gals. It's excellent. If you've never been there, just go out to their site, beyondfeartofreedom.org, and get the address and the phone number, and you can have all that happen for you. I'm Steve Savant, and so until next time, remember, no one's outside the reach of God. No, not one.